Hi everyone, my name is Maddie, welcome back to my channel and welcome to this video where I'm going to be doing my April wrap up. So April wasn't a great reading month for me. Like, I ended up doing okay and getting through a decent number of books, but it didn't feel like a good reading month. It was good at the beginning. I finished off a couple of books right at the beginning of the month that were kind of running over from March. I finished a few books for Readathon right at the beginning of the month. And then I ground to a little bit of a halt and struggled to read for the rest of the month. Partially, I was tired, I had a lot of work, all of this. Partially, it was at this point legal in the UK to meet up with people, and I work with a lot of people who like going to the pub in the evening for dinner. So all of a sudden my evenings kind of vanished, and I work a 10-hour day and then I go out in the evening and then I come home on the weekend and spend all my time doing YouTube stuff. And I was prepping for WHATEVER-YOU-WANT-ATHON, which has just been announced, Readathon I'm hosting in June. Links down below if you want to check it out. So with all of that combined, I didn't have nearly as much time for reading as I would have liked, which is shown by the fact I had finished 5 books by the 3rd of April, and I only managed to finish 9 books in the whole of April. So it's definitely a slow whole month, but it is what it is. We're going to run through some stats for the books that I read, and then we're going to run through the books that I read. I am absolutely exhausted today, so I do apologise for low energy. We're just chilling. I'm all like cozy on my sofa. I'm just going to run through these books and it's going to be a nice chill video. So as always, starting with stats, as I already said, I did read 9 books in April. Not bad, not as much as I would like. And that does bring my total for the year to 47 out of 52. So very promising, finishing that in May, which is terrifying and quite exciting. My total page count for the month was 2,784 pages, which averages out as 92.8 pages a day. Less than my 100 a day goal, but not awful. And it's 309 pages per book, which is about right. Some chunkier books this month, plus a few really short graphic novels. So that's the overview. Again, not bad, could have been better, could have been a lot worse, don't really mind it, would like to do better in May. But then moving into the types of books, so in terms of age range, got a big range this time. I had 3 adult books, 4 YA books, 1 middle grade, and 1 other. I read a non-fiction and I don't know where to put it in terms of age range, so I'm kind of just not. And then in terms of genre, I did have 3 fantasy books, 2 sci-fi books, 1 contemporary, 1 non-fiction, 1 classic, and 1 fabulist, which for the sake of my graphic, I'm going to lump into other so I don't have to make it really complicated because that's too many categories. But basically I had a really broad variety of books this month somehow. So in terms of star rating, it wasn't the worst month, but it definitely wasn't the best. I didn't have a single 5-star read, which is rare for me. I did have 5 4-star reads, and then I had 3 3-star reads, and then 1 unrated because I don't rate non-fiction. So not bad necessarily, but it's a little bit middle of the road. I would have appreciated some higher ratings and just a little bit unexciting, I guess, the star ratings this month. So as always, I'm going to run through all of these books in the order that I read them because I find it the easiest way of keeping track, and therefore we are starting with All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This is a non-fiction memoir following George M. Johnson, and it's talking all about his experience of growing up black and queer in America and his sort of family dynamics and external kind of influences and everything. Absolutely fascinating. I listened to the audiobook for this. I didn't actually read it physically, although I do have it physically, and it was fantastic. It was absolutely fascinating. I truly enjoyed it. It was so informative and so interesting, and I cried many times just hearing about this person's experiences and learning so much, and I feel like I don't have much to say on it because it was just fantastic. I don't rate non-fiction, so I don't have a rating for you, but I do truly recommend this book. It was really, really beautiful. It was really impactful. I know a load of people have absolutely loved this book in the last year, and I can absolutely see why, because it was absolutely great, and I really, really enjoyed my time listening to it, I guess, instead of reading it, and I would highly, highly recommend it. And I realise that is a very quick review because I don't know what else to say about it, but definitely worth a read. Next up, we had quite a disappointing read for me, unfortunately, which was Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston, and this I rated 3 stars. I thought I would love this book, and it's so shiny and pretty, so I really wanted to love this book. And this is a middle grade story following Amari, whose brother has gone missing and the police assume he's dead or run away or whatever, but she's convinced that he's not, that he's still around somewhere. And basically she ends up getting inducted into this school where you learn to be like a special agent for magical beings and stuff. It's a really interesting concept. I've heard a lot of people kind of saying it has Men in Black vibes, which I 100% see and did really enjoy. But however much I loved the concept of this book and wanted to love it, and I liked the characters and it was interesting, I cannot describe why I didn't want to pick it up. Every time I put it down, I just had no interest in picking it back up, and for me that massively impacted my enjoyment. I couldn't read a big chunk at a time, it didn't grab me, it didn't like engage me for some reason, which is really hard to explain, especially looking back, because I'm like, yeah, I really liked this character and that plot point was interesting. But as an overall enjoyment, I didn't love it. It was a 3-star for me. It was perfectly good. I know a load of people are absolutely adoring this book, so I would actually still recommend it if you enjoy reading middle grade stories, but it wasn't it for me. As I said, I really enjoyed the characters, especially one of the kind of antagonist-ish characters was really interesting. I thought the twists were done well. They weren't predictable. You didn't see them coming. The plot was interesting. Amari was a great character. It was a solid book. It just didn't do a lot for me. Next up, we do have the 3 books I read for Readathon, and I do actually have a whole vlog for Readathon, so if you want to watch that, you can do. I'll link it up there if you want to get some more thoughts on these books as I'm reading them. But the first one I finished was Saga Volume 6, which I absolutely adored. I thought this was an absolutely phenomenal graphic novel. I am obsessed with the series. I am so nearly done with it now, at least up to where it's currently published, and I'm quite stressed because everyone says it gets really like sad and I'm not sure I'm ready for this. But this was really, really good. This, more than any other volume so far, massively drew me into the story. I don't know what it was. I've enjoyed them the whole way through. But this one, suddenly, I just needed to read the next one, which is not something I've had so far. So that was really exciting and has me really excited for continuing the series. I did actually also read Volume 7 this month, which we'll get to in a minute. But I thought this was fantastic. This is a story of 2 people, a man and a woman, who are from warring races, from warring planets, and they fall in love, they get married, they have a child, but by doing this, they are in effect betraying both of their races, and then they become like enemy number 1 to everyone, and then they're trying to outrun people. There's so much war going on, and this is just a series full of politics and interesting dynamics and so many important discussions, and it's beautiful and fascinating, and I'm still amazed by how much you can care for these characters in such a short space of time, in such a short length of pages. It's exceptionally well done, and I can see why this is a very well-loved series, and it's becoming a very loved series for me as well. So yeah, 4 stars still. They're not quite hitting the 5-star for me, but that practically never happens to graphic novels. So really good, really enjoyed it. Next up, we did have another slightly disappointing read, and that was A Dark and Hollow Star by Ashley Shuttleworth. This was the March FAES and Gaze book club pick. I didn't end up being able to be on the live show, but I will still link it if you want to see Cecilia and Sandra's thoughts on this. I just couldn't make it that day. I wasn't feeling up to it, so I had to skip. But this was so disappointing. I genuinely thought this was going to be a 5-star new favourite for me. And I think I'm going to settle on a 3. It's not bad, but it didn't do a whole lot for me. It's 500 pages, and the concept is so interesting, and the characters, some of them I did actually quite like, but most of them I just don't really remember. And I feel like there was a lot, considering the length, that wasn't explained very well. So just as a concept, this is like an urban fantasy story. I don't even know what it's about. I only read it a few weeks ago, God. And in it, you're following people from like different parts of these different fairy realms, and people who've been exiled, and like all sorts of different things. And I honestly couldn't tell you what happened. Okay, yeah, a series of murders start happening in Toronto, and the like fairy courts are possibly going to get outed to humans because of it, and then things start happening. I feel like it's evidence of the fact that it wasn't that good by the fact that 3 weeks later I literally can't even give you a good synopsis of it. It just didn't stick at all. So slightly underwhelming. As I said, the concept was interesting, but it was so poorly explained. In this, you have the Seelie Court and the Unseelie Court. There was never explanation of what the difference of these things were. I don't know a huge amount about fairies. I know they're a well-known part of myth, but I feel like in especially a YA book, you can't go on the assumption that people will understand the difference between Seelie and Unseelie, because like I certainly don't, and I have actually read some books with fairies before. So I just feel like there were oversights in terms of that, and that was a bit disappointing. As I said, I did like some of the characters. I liked Nausicaa, I can't remember their names, but the 2 guys that we follow, I enjoyed them. but it fell a little bit flat. I've, heard it's going to be really queer, and there were definitely queer characters in here, but not that you need to be in a relationship to be queer, obviously, but I would have liked to see relationships develop a bit more from what they were hinted at. And just, there was a lot of things I would have seen more of, and yet it felt too long at 500 pages. I don't know what that says, but it was a slightly mediocre read for me. And then on to the final book that I managed to read for Readathon on the 3rd of April, that is Watch Over Me by Nina LaCour. This was a 4-star read for me. I did not know what to expect going into this. I'd not really got a full picture of the synopsis. It's like a short little book with not a lot on a page, so it's a really quick read. I think I read this in just over an hour, maybe an hour and a half, so it's definitely a quick read considering it's like 200 odd pages. But this was really, really interesting. This read quite differently from the normal kind of books I read, but also felt quite similar in the terms of like lyrical, slightly fabulous. But very brief overview, this follows, I can't remember the character's name, Mila. This follows Mila or Mila, who has been in foster care her whole life. And at the age of 18, when she's aging out of the system, she finds this couple on an island who kind of take in foster kids, and the older kids teach the younger kids. And so she's kind of going to be a teacher. And it's a weird place. Weird happenings are going on, and it's just very strange and very interesting. Quite deep. Quite a lot of trigger warnings for abuse and neglect in this, just due to finding out Mila's backstory, and how she got to be in the foster care system. But it was a really interesting read and definitely very gripping. It's a fantastic book to read in one sitting. It fits that extremely well. Next up, I did read one of my most anticipated releases of 2021, and that is Perfect on Paper by Sophie Gonzalez. This was really fun. This is an LGBT YA contemporary. Our main character Darcy is bi, her best friend is lesbian. There are so many queer characters in this book, which we love to see. But as an overall premise, this does follow Darcy, who runs almost an agony aunt for her school. She has a locker where people leave anonymous letters, and she responds to them and helps people out with relationship advice. And it was so interesting. This was a 4-star for me. It didn't quite hit 5. It was really close because the romance was really cute. But I often find with contemporaries, they take a little dash of something special to quite hit that 5-star mark, which this just didn't quite have, though I was also a little bit slumpy all month, so it may have just been that. But this was really fun. I had a brilliant time reading this. As I said, Darcy has this agony aunt column, and basically where the story really kicks off is this guy Brougham approaches her and says, I will pay you a lot of money to coach me through getting back with my girlfriend. And Darcy's in love with her best friend, who's a girl, and just so much messiness, but it was fantastic. I had a brilliant time reading this. The characters were fantastic. They were so diverse. They were so varied and interesting, and just kept me engaged the whole way through. The plot was really cool. It felt quite similar to some other books that I've read, but it felt quite similar to a couple other books I've read, such as like Jack of Hearts it felt quite similar to, and I'm sure there's another one recently. Oh, I'm thinking of Sex Education, the TV show. But nonetheless, it stood really, really well, and I found it really fun, and I know a lot of people are loving it for very good reason. So I will absolutely be trying more Sophie Gonzalez's books in future. I am actually currently reading another one of their books, so already started on that. But yeah, I had a brilliant time with this one. It's a really, really fun YA contemporary, and I feel like it got a lot deeper than quite a lot of, because I would consider this a fluffy YA contemporary, but it really towed that line between fluff and kind of hard-hitting really well, which I really appreciated. The next book that I read was actually the FAES and Gaze book club pick for April, and that is Black Queen's Meeting by Alex London. The live show for this will probably be sometime this week, this time that you are seeing this, so I can't remember what date it'll be, maybe Saturday? Unsure. But this was a reread for me. I first read this book when it first came out, which was probably 2018, I would imagine, and I loved it, and I never got around to reading the other two, and I've been meaning to reread this, so I've been pushing for FAES and Gaze to do it so that I could reread it, and I'm really glad I did. It wasn't quite a 5-star for me this time. I think I've knocked it just down to a 4 or 4.5, but it was still absolutely fantastic. I know a lot of people aren't enjoying this book, but I personally absolutely loved it. I thought it was really, really great. I think the writing in this is just beautiful. I find the world really interesting, but my favourite thing is absolutely the characters and their relationships. But just for a quick synopsis before getting into that, this does follow Kylie and Bryson, who are 2 twins who live in the 6 villages, I think. And they have to go on this big mission because basically their father has left them with loads of debt that they're trying to pay off when he died. And so they are basically selling birds. Falconry is a big thing in this world. So they're selling birds and managing to pay off this debt, but then all of a sudden they get roped into this mission to go and find something called the Ghost Eagle, I think, which is this like mythic bird that no one's managed to capture, but if they do, they can pay off a whole load of debt with it. And so they go on a bit of a mission, and it's the, as I said, it's the character relationships for me that really, really appeal. The sibling relationship between Bryson and Kylie is just fascinating. The way Bryson especially interacts with people in terms of his romantic relationships is really interesting. Bryson, as far as we know, is gay. He's only with men in this book, and I'm pretty sure he is confirmed as gay. And it's really, really interesting to read the different ways he interacts with different relationships. Kylie is questionable, ace or aromantic, and I think that is actually confirmed in later books, though I have not read later books yet. So lots of queer rep, really just, oh, it's so good. I love this book. I think it's really good, and I'm so excited to read the sequels, because from what I've heard, the sequels get even better. Next up, I'll just talk about extremely quickly, is Saga Volume 7. So this I gave a 4-star as well. I've already told you about Saga Volume 6, and unsurprisingly, the synopsis of this one would be the same. I really enjoyed it. I'm still really intrigued to read 8 and 9. I probably didn't like this one quite as much as Volume 6, but at the same time, I loved it. It's a really interesting series, which I'm really excited to continue with. And then the final book I read in April was the Burned Books Club pick for March and April, which was The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. We chose this as we did a very much contemporary dystopian for the first book, which was the first 2 months of the year, and so we wanted to do a classic for the second time as voted on by you guys. And so we chose Day of the Triffids because we could have done something like 1984 or Fahrenheit 451, but we assumed a lot of people would have read those, so we went with a slightly less well-known classic. It's obviously very well-known, but just very slightly less so. And it was a slightly underwhelming read. I can't even remember what I decided to rate this. So this was a 3, again for me, much more the lower end of a 3, and it wasn't bad, it was perfectly well written, it was perfectly digestible for a classic actually. I mean, it was okay. That's the thing, it was okay. It just wasn't good, it wasn't interesting, I didn't care particularly. I feel like this is the most ambivalent about a book I've ever been. If you do want to get more thoughts, I would definitely recommend watching the live show, because I cannot remember what we discussed, but we actually spent a good 45 minutes discussing this book and had quite a lot to say, and the comments were extremely helpful on that as well. We got a lot of input from them. So do check that out if you're interested. But yeah, I was just so ambivalent. It's a funny anecdote which I like telling, is I leave stuff everywhere. I'm awful, I have no object permanence, so I regularly leave things behind, and when I was on the train to visit my family whilst reading this book, this was the one thing I took out of my bag, because I try not to take things out of my bag because then I leave them. And my mum, knowing what I'm like, messages me and like, make sure you don't leave anything on the train. My first thought was, I wouldn't intentionally leave it, but if I did it by accident, I wouldn't really mind. Which I think just shows I don't think I would have DNF'd it even if I wasn't reading it for the book club. I just didn't care. I just wasn't really interested. It's a very quick plot summary. This follows a world where there are these like plants that have appeared, and when they mature to a certain age, they can kind of unroot themselves from the ground and walk around, and they kill people and then eat the dead corpse. And then this big event happens that turns the whole world blind, but therefore the plants have an advantage, and so the plants kind of start running rampant, and it's post-apocalyptic dystopian kind of vibes. It's strange concept, but kind of interesting. So yes, very ambivalent, 3-star. Please watch the live if you want more comments, because we had a lot more to say then than I do now. But that is it. Those are the 9 books I read. It's not a bad stack for a month when you stack it all up like that. I think it just doesn't feel like much to me, because over half of it was read in the first 3 days of the month, and then I just read nothing for the last 27 days or whatever else is left. So wasn't my best month, but it'll do, and I'm feeling really positive about May. So that's that. That's all the books I read. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know how your reading in April went. I hope it went slightly better than mine did, at least for you. And yeah, I think that's it. So we're gonna go with that. I will see you all in a future video. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you'd like to see more content from me. If you go down in the description, there are links to the book clubs and read-alongs that I have mentioned in this video, as well as the readathon that I'm hosting in June, WHATEVER-YOU-WANT-ATHON, and also my wishlist and my Patreon and all my social medias if you want to check out any of that. But that is it for this video, so bye, and I'll see you in the next one.